All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to CRS360. This is our ongoing webinar series featuring content designed to help you learn, connect, and advance. And this month's episode, I think, is going to be a good one. It's called Cultivating Awesome: Practical Steps to a Thriving Workplace. This is a callback to a session that we did at CRS 2025 back in February, which was called Culture, the C Word You Should Say. Had some great feedback on that. And this is not a repeat performance of that, but rather additional thoughts and perspectives on this very important part of the workplace experience. And I want to give a quick plug, because if you couldn't make it to CRS, or if you missed this session or others back in February, all of our educational sessions are available to view at countryradioseminar.com. So please check those out. With that, I'm going to hand it to Mike Peterson, reprising his role as the moderator for this conversation. Mike, one quick thing before you guys get started. Because we are recording this for on demand, we can't facilitate a formal Q&A session like we do at CRS, but all the panelists today have agreed to share their contact information. So if you have a question for Mike or Kevin or Alan or John, then you can reach out to them directly. And we'll try and show this slide before we sign off in just a little bit. So, all right, with that, Mike, I'll say thanks to you for coming back and moderating the session again, and we'll let you and your panel get started.
Sounds great. Thank you. I'm going to start with one thought that we started to touch on at the actual panel in Nashville. And that specific question was worded slightly different than the way I'm going to phrase it now. We got into it a little bit, and I felt like the answer, I wanted to get into it more. The answers were all good, but I felt like we had, because of timing, it kind of left a little meat on the table there. So we're going to revisit this. The original question was, what does culture mean to a 30-year-old versus a 50-year-old? And we're going to rephrase that a little bit and throw in the gens, Gen Z versus Boomer. We've got a lot of new people coming into the business. Whether it's on the audio side, the radio side, the podcast side, which radio companies are now heavily involved with, the promotion side, the event side, and then on the music side with John Loba specifically. And then we've got a lot of other people who are on the top end of that spectrum from the Gen point of view. And the interesting part that came out of Nashville was everybody had a really good answer, but we didn't really have time to dig into the specific differences of each answer. So I'm going to start with Kevin, and in no particular order. The reason why I'm starting with Kevin is because you're first on my screen. We're going to go left to right. Alan's arms are up like...
You started with me every time, and I was just expecting you to go, but let's do Kevin. That's good.
No, we're going to put Kevin on the spot right now. Let's talk about culture for somebody that's a Gen Z versus a Boomer. I mean, it's two very different perspectives in the business. Two very different levels of experience on what they've accomplished, what they're hoping to learn. And, it's kind of an eyes wide open point of view versus, yeah, been there, done that. We're grinding to get through it. So let's talk about that, Kevin, if you'll give us your feedback, please.
Sure. One of my favorite things about the team that's here where I'm based in Albany is, we've got market veterans that have been, on air for in excess of 40 years. And then we also have some brand new people who are new to the industry that, that maybe have 2 or 3 years. And it's great because I think they learn from each other. But, in terms of the question about how do you do culture differently? I think there are some similarities. First off, it's building trust, among the team. It's building trust, in the leadership group, so that the team can, know that they can come to you for whatever it is. And then, it's a word that I've been using a lot more is care. If you can learn about someone, learn about what makes them tick, that's part of what's going to lead you to where they need to be in the culture that we define in the business. To a degree, I think a good workplace is simply a good workplace. I think it's a situation where once you know people, regardless of what their generation is, that you can probably speak to the company's culture in their language by getting to know them.
John Loba, what about you?
Yeah, 100% agree, Kevin. I love what you say. We don't try to have different cultures for different generations. We try to have one very specific culture. And the way we communicate that to each generation or demographic is, as you say, I love what you say, listening, knowing how they best receive information, how they best respond. I think in the previous panel, or maybe it was a side discussion, there was a potentially suggestion, well, do more senior, more experienced executives care as much about culture as a younger generation? Or is it just the check, the paycheck, the dollar figure? And I think that is absolutely not true at all. Absolutely, younger generations' culture, purpose, and values are so very important, but they are to an older generation as well. I can't tell you the number of times that I've had inquiries from senior experienced executives who were, you know, making very healthy livings, who said, you know what, at this stage in my life, it's not about the money. I want to belong to a place that I wake up every morning and am excited to go into, where I feel like my voice is heard, where I can make a difference. And I think at the end of the day, no matter the organization, that is such a universal desire, is to be heard and to understand purpose. And if you have those, that transcends generations. So.
Alan, what about you?
Yeah, 100%, agree. And just several people are coming to mind. I think that when I think about, culture for my team, it's about, can I thrive here, right? Can I flourish? Like the title of it is, can I be awesome? Right? Can I be awesome, in this organization? And, my team is spread out across 4 different states and several different metropolitan areas. And so for different generations, I think that may mean something different. So when we're recruiting some Gen Zs that are right out of college, or they're right in that Gen Z, often the question they're asking is, what am I going to learn by being here? Like, how am I going to grow? And so that's a conversation we have. Like, this is what the culture allows you to grow and to do and to kind of be. And they get real excited about that. Our millennials on my team are kind of, they're mid-career and life stage. They've got some babies, they have some, they're balancing some things. And so, for them, it seems like culture is, can I contribute, but also, do I have a life? Can I balance those things and, still attend soccer games or still attend baseball games and still, be a part of a good organization? That organization provides me flexibility, I should say. And I think for, Gen Xers and maybe even boomers, it's about, what can I contribute? Like, is this a place, kind of what John was just talking about? Is this a place I can come and not just thrive myself, but help others thrive? Like, I can pass it forward. I can be someone who can contribute to others' success, because probably as David Brooks talks about, the first mountain, all the achievements and the accolades, you've probably got a lot of those things, and now you're looking for a little more meaning. And sometimes that meaning is in being a part of something that's a little bit bigger, than yourself. So I think it's the same. It's the same thing. Like, can I thrive here? But how I thrive here might tweak a bit based off of the generation.
I want to, I'll add to that. How can they thrive here? What can they learn? I'll take off my moderator hat and put on a panelist hat just for a second. To me, I think we have to make sure that they understand that they can thrive and explain that process and what they will learn. Being in radio for as long as I have, I remember I'm sure everybody got similar advice, but it's, don't ever say no, do everything they ask, because you'll learn everything at some point. And in radio, it could have been more true, especially starting small markets and then moving up. And at some point, you touched every facet of the industry. And there's still an element of that, and it's still true in radio, and it could be true in everything, is that give them those opportunities to experience something that's beyond whatever they were hired for. So you can give that learning thing. Now, I say that as if I'm the expert, and I'm sure I'm not, but it is interesting that when we get into those conversations with that generation, what I really like about it is that they're reminding me that that's what we need to do for them. You know,
Mm.
culture isn't as easy as the four of us are going to make it sound. You know, you have to work
Yeah.
at it. You have to apply this stuff. Otherwise, we're all just going to get real busy and we're going to forget about it.
Mm.
So I like the fact that it forces me to think about that. It forces me to remember the people that kind of took me under their wing in those moments, those transitional moments, whether it was hiring or, hey, there's something else we want you to take on. And the way they did it, the way they cultivated it, and of course, I didn't realize it at the time, but you know, looking back, it's like, wow, had those people not taken the time to explain that or show that or open that door, I have no idea where I would have been. And I always felt like I was a part of the community and the brand, and I contributed regardless of the position or, you know, how much I wasn't making. Because, you know, we don't get into this business to get rich. Um, One more thought on that. I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to go back around the horn and I'll talk to John, or I'll start with Kevin. We'll just go in the same sequence. But give me something more specific as to, you know, when we're talking about that generation of hiring or bringing in, do you have an example or scenario? We don't need to mention names
Mhm.
where you were either reminded of or challenged in a way where you thought, yeah, you know what, I need to make sure I do this right and pay attention to how we onboard or develop. And the reason why I want to go here is that I have a 22-year-old daughter who's interviewing, first kind of real job, fresh out of college. And I've eavesdropped on one of her Zoom interviews and was curious as to the questions they were asking her and the questions that she was asking them as it related to culture. And then, you know, she gave me the download just the other day on an in-person interview that she had, and culture came up in that conversation. And I found it fascinating because here I was a student again, kind of
Mm.
reliving the whole thing. But Kevin, is there a specific situation, a person, or an example that stands out to you? And then we'll go to John and Alan after Kevin.
You know, it's interesting as you tell the story of your daughter. I have a daughter who's 23, and she got a great job in San Diego right out of college. And her job is wellness director at her company. And I sat through, much like you did, and eavesdropped on the process. And again, it boils down to what's important to the person on the other end of the phone. So, you know, a specific example, I think it's kind of an overarching answer that gets more specific as you get to know the person. So, you know, you know, in the case of my daughter, or even, you know, one of the younger people that we've hired here on our top 40 station recently, it's about getting to know what's important to them. You know, we recently moved a person, you know, away from their home, away from their folks, a younger person, and it's the first time, and there's excitement, and there's, you know, there's probably a bit of fear and those things. So, you know, in talking with that person and getting to know him, you know, what we did is try to become family, talk about things that were important to him, and you know, and to also make sure that we made accommodations so that he could go and see his family when it was necessary, despite the fact that he's newer here, and you know, over time you build up more vacation. You know, we try to be creative with allowing people to have some flexibility and really, again, it's a specific answer, probably based on the person, and again, building that trust and getting to know them and caring.
John, what about you? A specific example or a situation that you can speak to?
I can think of a couple. You know, I'm first off making sure that your actions match your words. We talk so much about transparency, having honest discussions, being a safe space. And part of that is when when I say I really want for younger staff or brand new staff, I said, you're coming into this with such fresh eyes. You have such perspective that those of us who've been here longer or older do not. Please speak up. It's safe. Please give the perspective, even if it's uncomfortable. And last week I was bringing that up in an artist development meeting, and I was so damn excited that I got two different very in-depth emails on a question I was asking about it. And I was insanely busy. I was traveling, but I wanted to make sure to acknowledge it, create an action plan for it, and let them know that they were heard. And one of those individuals actually sent it to my assistant and not directly to me. My response was, "Why did you send it to Tyler? Send it right to me." He goes, "Well, I didn't want to, take up your time. I didn't know if that was appropriate." And I very, quickly said, "I am not Ivory Tower, please. You're helping me as much as you're helping yourself and the company." So being consistent and reinforcing that, that was with a couple of younger staff members. Over the last few days with a very experienced veteran, we have I had a discussion. There is so much transformation going on in the industry, and they were talking about a specific downsizing that had occurred, and some other downsizing that had been happening. And this person said, "Please, give me the heads up if you're going to whack me or if something's going to happen." And I said, I've been very specifically, I talk about the structural changes we are having and how you upskill yourself, how you make yourself um, add value and make it so that will never happen. We talk about that all the time. So I said, I give clues. I don't know what 6 months or a year from now will happen, but I'm very transparent about that. And she said, "Yep, you're absolutely right." I said, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'll give you the roadmap there. We encourage entrepreneurial nature. This is on you, but there's the path." So I think it is staying consistent to make sure your actions match your words.
Great point of view. Alan.
Well, the one thing I've learned is that we all have like 21, 22-year-old daughters. I also have been watching my daughter look for a job. And to me, it's been interesting. She doesn't have one yet. But my older daughter, I remember watching her walk into the first day of her first job out of college and being shocked at those first moments of she kind of showed up, they kind of sort of were expecting her, she kind of sat and waited for a little bit, then she had like an orientation video, like she was and her experience after that first day was like her energy was lessened. Like she came into it real excited, and then afterwards she was like, I think it's going to be okay, was like her comment after that first day. And it was just a smack across my face because I realized that I did the same thing to some of our new hires where yeah, they're getting to start, and the level of their excitement to start wasn't matching our level of welcoming them in that first 15 minutes. Like it's like first day of school energy, walking through the door, and is everybody there just excited and welcoming and bringing you in, and here, and you've got your stuff, and here's your swag, and here's your interviews, and your day's full and things are happening. It's that, I tell my team, I say, what are they going to call and tell their mom when they leave the work? Because mom's going to call and say, how was day one? Is that going to be an amazing day? Like, have we made it an amazing day? And so I think that for us is a standard that we talk about on our team whenever somebody's coming in, is how do we make the first 15 minutes amazing? How do we make the first day, amazing for them? And I'll also say kind of what John was saying. Part of that first day is I have a moment of time, about an hour with a person. Sometimes it's virtual and sometimes it's face to face. And I talk about culture. I talk about values. I talk about like our goals, what we're hitting. I try to be now I know it overwhelms them. Like they're not going to remember all the stuff I go over, but what I hope they remember is they got to meet with the leader on the very first day and they told them everything and they're open, right? That's what the impression is I want to leave. And so it's interesting how when you watch it through somebody else's eyes, it kind of changes your behavior and you're like, okay, we've got to be better. I got to be better at that. So I would hopefully say that we do that every time. We don't, but that's the standard, right? How do we make day one, first 15 minutes, first day awesome?
I think
That,
that's an interesting point. Go ahead, John.
I was gonna say, I love that. I don't know that we've put as much focus on that first day and probably should. One thing we do is, 6 months or so in, it's not formalized, but I really want to loop back around so they know we're still paying attention, we still care, we are still listening. And that was actually born out of when I started my career. I remember I was 6 months in, and there had been an incredible week of various experiences.
Hmm.
And Jim Ed Norman, who was the president of Warner Brothers at the time, I get on an elevator with him, and there was somebody else from the company. And it shows just how within the same company, even within the same circle, you can have very different messaging and experiences. And the presentation of perception can have a adverse or really positive effect if you don't have that right. And so I'm excited talking about all these things that have happened in the last week. And this other executive said, that's why we hire kids like you. And I said, what do you mean? He says, to remind us how great this business is.
Mm.
And I'm like, you have to be reminded how great this is? And he said, he goes, give it 10 years, kid. You'll understand. You'll be jaded like everybody else.
Mm.
And it just, boom, just crushed me, deflated me. And he gets off the elevator on the second floor. I'm in, luckily, with Jim Ed. And Jim Ed says, don't listen to him. He said, if you love music, if you love people, and you love creating connection, you'll love this job for the rest of your life. And every morning when I leave my house, I think about Jim Ed's words instead of this other guy's words about being jaded. So I really, hope and work and try to remind people that, let's have different voices, but with respect to that and culture, let's have a unified voice. So.
A couple of very specific points there that I like, and I made notes of both of them. And John Loba, I'm quoting this. I won't publish my version of this. I don't know how this thing is going to get published, but you have to be reminded that you love this business. I just love that. Like, why? You have to? Yeah, there's so many great things about the business. Parts of any business, though, can get complicated. And then, Alan, I want to just touch on one thing you said. I think that first day is really important. I don't know that I've looked at it like that. Of course, there's onboarding and things that we do and all those kinds of things. But I think that first day is really important. So, great points. The second part of the topic here is an extension of really kind of where we started the panel in Nashville. It's 2025. The world is different, and I don't need to list all the reasons or ways that the world is different that we live in 2025 versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago. The pandemic changed a lot of things for people, not necessarily all bad, but it certainly changed a lot of the way we go about our jobs. And we talked a little bit in Nashville, just kind of about the mental mindset of that, with all of the changes. The industry's changing. The economy is affecting things. Again, not going to go through the long list here, but at the end of the day, the core values of what we all do are still very much alive. So in Nashville, we focused a lot about the mindset and how do we make sure that people are engaged. How do we talk about the tougher times or the days where some tough decisions have to be made? How do we talk about and clearly communicate a major strategic change in the way we do things in our individual spaces? And I thought we did a really good job of that. But one thing that we didn't really talk about is, there was the mindset, but what about the physical side of it? Because hybrid work schedules and all of this technology, the fact that we can do a CRS360 on Zoom, and we've got, 4 really busy people here, and I think this is going to be a productive session. But everybody now has the ability to kind of create their own flexibility. And Alan mentioned it in an answer earlier, lifestyle, get off early to go, to the support the kids' youth baseball game or whatever that scenario might be. Travel's different, but it's the same. We can Zoom from an airport. We can Zoom from hotel rooms as if we're in the middle of the normal daily functioning operations. But it affects a lot of our employees, and here we are all as managers trying to manage this, hybrid work schedule. The question I think going into this, and again, Kevin, I'll start with you, we'll follow the same sequence, is what have you done to make sure that culture still is alive and well through this remote hybrid thing that has become very much the norm for us?
Yeah, it's a lot of things. I think we start because we kind of start in culture with encouragement. And so regardless of what the platform is, if it's a Zoom platform or if it's a face-to-face staff meeting or anything like that, I mean, we start by encouraging people. And what I mean by that is I go back to how can you not be having fun? I do a weekly meeting with programmers, and it's a Zoom call because we have, different markets and whatever. And, the one thing that I remind them of every single time, though, is that what our goal is. And our goal really is to um, be excellent in everything that we're trying to accomplish. And we talk about specifics when we talk about that. And then to have so much fun doing it that we're the envy of every other broadcast company. And if we have more days like that, then we are successful. And not every day will be like that. Um, There'll be days where you're frustrated. There'll be days with all these things. I think, we have very few people who work entirely remotely. So there's always some sort of something available to have a touch point. There's, we have a lot of meals together. We do a lot of lunch and learns. Oftentimes that is sales and programming together. We'll be doing a social media lunch and learn coming up pretty soon, where basically we're going to have pizzas delivered to all the locations or subs or something, and we'll be learning together as a group, electronically via Zoom, but we'll all be having lunch together and going through some of our social media goals and whatnot. I think, technology is always scary at first, and then it's something that you can further embrace. Uh, you know, I think if people are doing their work and their jobs, I'm not so concerned anymore about where they sit. I think if it goes back again, and I sound like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but um, if you go in and you get to know the person and you build trust and you care, uh, it kind of doesn't matter if they're on the phone or whatever. It does present some challenges. There's no question about it. I mean, it's hard to get a feel for body language and people who may not participate as much. For them, I would probably go a little deeper and try a little more one-on-one time, even if that one-on-one time is just the two of us on a Zoom or a phone call. Um, and I'm lucky because I don't have to travel all over the earth like Loba does. My markets are all in driving distance. The furthest one is 2 hours, and if I have to, I'll hop in the car and have some real personal time.
John, what about you? How do you keep your staff engaged, connected when everybody's everywhere, not always in the same building at the same time?
Right. First off, I will say I'm a huge believer in gathering together in person. That's optimal. There is just a degree of interaction, a degree of feedback, like Kevin mentioned. You pick up on a lot of nonverbal stuff. There's just a dynamic there and an energy there that I really believe in. And luckily, speaking of culture, where culture is moving right now, it's a lot of companies pushing everybody back to the office. We've never made it mandatory. We've played a little bit with, a required number of days in the office, but they're suggestions. I want to have a culture where people come in when they don't have to. When it was, for a while there, we had 3 days a week and it was a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's been very interesting to see the number of people that show up on Mondays and on Fridays because they want to be a part of that energy. They want to be a part of that exchange. Nobody's penalized for not being it. So in general, I'm a fan of that in person. That being the case, though, so thankful for COVID because of this video element of it. The reality is that there's a lot of travel in our business, and it allows you to maintain that culture and that energy when those are traveling, when they can have something besides just audio, when they can get that visual part of this. It shrinks that distance, and you're not so on an island. When I was a radio regional, one of the challenges was always the West Coast reps always felt very disconnected to what was going on in the rest of the country. Um, every West Coast rep you would talk about, they were really on their own island. the video aspect, the Zoom aspect has really helped shrink that. Another aspect is I've taken on this larger role of overseeing all genres for North and South America. It is that ability, not just myself to stay in touch with each of these staffs, but for each of our divisions to really have exchange and feel like they're in the same room with other divisions. We are not siloed, and the reinforcement of culture, the sharing of culture has what we have now, and how quickly we have in trying to change some things in some of our non-Nashville offices could have never happened or could not have happened with the speed that Zoom allows. So LA office and New York office were vastly different than the Nashville office for many years. Within a year period, one of our partners in LA, who was actually in Nashville, was a partner in Nashville. He moved out here about the same time I was had this new assignment. He says, I love that Nashville culture, you can feel it throughout the LA office. And he says it happens so quick and it's so consistent to what you guys are. That wouldn't have happened without this new technology. So I'm so very thankful for it.
That's good. It's interesting you talk about the Nashville culture in the LA office. Another thing that I would just want to highlight real quick before we move on to Alan is you both touched on optimizing the in-person experience, the group get together. You know, I think you're right. That needs to be more meaningful now than it ever has been, because the physical side of this is just the nonverbals, just the physical connection, the eye contact, all of those things. It's just really powerful. Alan, I'm going to kind of change this one up for you just for a second, because I think I'm gonna attempt to give you a two-part question, given what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can give us like a 15-second or a 20-second snapshot, the elevator pitch of what Dale Carnegie does, because you've got culture within your own company, and then what you do
Mm.
for, everybody you consult, you advise, you guide.
Yeah.
So like I said, give us a snapshot of what Dale Carnegie does, and then talk to us about, the your from the business standpoint of how you
Sure.
function within the company, and then
Yeah.
what are you telling people on the outside?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So Dale Carnegie, we're about activating the untapped potential of others, and we do that primarily through experiences, training experiences. So that's where we're bringing people into a room, as John talked about, and having an experience where it transforms their thinking, transforms their behaviors, so that they can transform the results that they get for the organization. And so, particularly within this industry, what that often looks like is how do you build somebody's confidence so that they can really communicate and present and talk about what they do in a way that's going to compel others to be involved in that, and then also how they lead others, right, to do that as well. So that's what I get to do on a daily basis, and I love seeing it in all different kinds, of organizations, seeing that happen. Now you got me wound up about my own stuff, so I forgot the second half of the question. Mike, what was the second part I was supposed to talk
Well,
about?
we're talking about, the hybrid work schedule,
Right.
the
Okay.
flexibility, the ability to be remote.
Yeah.
Loba's world is a lot of travel.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different for everybody, but how do we keep people connected, engaged, and how do we
Hmm.
keep culture front and center when, people are on airplanes in hotels around the country or
Right.
wherever, or somebody's going to, hey, I'm going to work from home tomorrow because I've got to run some errands. That's
Yeah.
okay. How does it affect your specific work world, with Dale Carnegie?
Yeah, so it's been wild. This time 5 years ago, so April of 5 years ago, we went from a 98% in-person training experience to a 100% virtual training experience. And I had to move hundreds of people from in-person to online within just a few weeks to make that happen. And so very quickly companies started saying, okay, we can do that. Like, we can get cameras on, we can have interactions, we can do coaching, we can do these things. And so I think that really accelerated the transition for a lot of those organizations. Now, most companies have gone back to face because they just can at this point. And I believe, if you were to back me up against the wall, it's better if you're in person to do those types of things. But for companies that are still very virtual, a couple of things that we do to try and activate that, and I do it inside my own organization too, is that whenever we get on, I think what John said is so critical. It's cameras on, right? You got to see people. Not only does it help me get to feel who you are, but it keeps everyone else engaged because we all know when cameras go off, it's really easy to start looking at the second screen and start looking at other stuff and just be listening, but not really, paying attention. And I think particularly for our organizations, we want people that are, if we're going to bring everybody into a meeting, let's make everybody in that meeting mentally and visually, if you will. So I think that's really critical. One of the other things that we find that our customers have really liked, and we've done it too, is you start every meeting off with what we call good news, personal and professional. And so it does a couple of things. First of all, it kind of orients the mind. It's back to kind of what John was talking about in the elevator. What's our view of what's happening? Start with the positive. It does a lot of things psychologically and neurologically for us when we think about those things. It opens up doorways for creativity and innovation and all kinds of things. But it's interesting when you ask people, tell me about some good news, they often choose the personal. And then you start to get in a virtual environment to hear about the baseball game and the new fur baby that they picked up. And you start to hear these stories that you would hear if you were in the same physical space, but now you're in a virtual space. And now I'm getting to know that, Jordan, who works for me down in my Atlanta office, has a new puppy and how that puppy's doing. And when that puppy joins the calls, whether she wants them to or not, I know who that, because she's shared that, right, through that good news experience. So good news, personal and professionally, I think is fun. I also, we started one that I really love. We created a party planning committee, a la The Office, right? Party planning committee. Took the people on my team, no matter where they were, that were most gifted at just having fun, and they got together and they do that once a month. And so we have a lunch once a month. It's virtual. We all get on cameras on and we do all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's really bonded the team over a period of time. One thing that we started, so this was 5 years ago in April, we were having our first like big company virtual meeting, and we decided that we were going to sing happy birthday to the people who had birthdays in April. And I don't know if y'all remember at that time, there were all these videos of like Broadway cast and different artists that were doing these synced up Zoom, gorgeous videos, like the entire cast of Hamilton singing, they sounded amazing. And I'm not an artist. I'm not, and so we decided we're going to just happy birthday. And it was terrible. It was horrendous. It was awful. And the distance between what I was hoping to hear and what I heard was just a chasm. And so we decided to lean into the awfulness of that. And so for 5 years now, every month we sing happy birthday and we try to make it worse than the month before. And we have to warn new hires that that's what's going to happen because one month we did and they were like, this is really terrible. But it was kind of that purpose that way. But it's a weird thing, but it's a fun thing that we're doing kind of virtually together, that we have that space and people now look forward to it. So I think whenever you can kind of start those weird virtual tradition type things, I think that helps, kind of bond people together as
Alan,
well.
I'm curious for that monthly party, what is the length of that usually?
It's 1 hour. It's a
Mhm.
lunch. So we're in different time zones. So we kind of pick central time lunch because most of us are in central time lunch, but it's basically over the lunch hour. And sometimes people, they're kind of eating some things, but we'll be playing games and doing different online stuff. It's
Love that.
trivia. I mean, I've got some people who love to have fun and they have fun. So
Good.
Alan, I think I joked in Nashville that you should probably be the one moderating this panel.
no, you're
And
doing a great job.
I think you just reinforced it. You're awesome at what you do. The next question, and I think this will be our last, but I'll poke at it a couple different ways. Alan just talked about this. They started I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember your exact words, the fun committee or the party planners.
Parting Planning Committee, parting PPC.
Kevin and John, and I'll give you some input on what we do too, but I'll start with you guys. But how much input do your employees have on dictating culture? But under the caveat of this remote world that we're living in, Kevin, go ahead. How much input? What's the feedback? Are there surveys? Are you looking for feedback constantly? Can you talk about that and give any specific examples?
Sure, I do it in a lot of different ways. I mean, first off, one of the things I believe, that is part of a good culture is inclusion. And we were getting ready to change a bunch of software, which is always a pleasant experience for everyone. And but the one thing that I did is I've given everybody a chance to see it before we do it, and so at the same time that I'm auditioning new software, they have an opportunity to do it too. And granted, I might, and this is just a specific example, I might see it first. But through that, I have a bunch of questions, and then I start thinking about people. Oh, this person would be using it in this way or that way. I definitely want them on the phone so they can ask those kinds of questions. So I think inclusion is really important. And so I do a one-on-one each week or every other week, depending on how busy the program director is, because we have some that are over multiple brands. Um, I'll attend staff meetings that are here in the building where I'm based when they happen. Um, but I think probably most of it comes out of the one-on-one because we can talk about anything. And the fact that, it is it's an opportunity where I learn, unfortunately, we have some people who have sick family members. That's important to know, I mean, that's an important thing to know what they're doing. Because, I remember the old saying of, well, when you come to work, you got to leave all that stuff behind, which, frankly, I find is crap. That's not realistic. So, again, it really has to do with that four-letter word, care. And so, yeah, I like to know what bothers them. I had to help, someone manage up last week. Not an easy task in some cases, right? So, but it's because, I really kind of know both parties. I work with them directly. Uh, and through that was able to facilitate getting the message through of something that did not happen the way that, a fellow leader had hoped that it would go down. And, and so I think it all has to do with, all these things that are cliches, maybe that, the most valuable gift that you have is time. And if you think of that, the most valuable thing that you have is time. Setting up time to have that individual one-on-one time for everybody is probably the most important thing, because it's amazing the things that you learn. It's amazing the things that, in a public setting, someone may be embarrassed to say, you know what, I was never shown how to do this.
Mm.
And then you can, with a great deal of integrity, allow them to have a learning experience. And then they go home feeling great that day because, they've learned something new. So I think I answered the question. I hope I did.
Yep.
Okay.
John, how much input do you look for? Is it strategically asked for? And how do you apply it if you do apply it?
First of all, I could just do a carbon copy of what Kevin said. When we do these things, I'm reminded why you and I are so close, because we have such similar spirits and styles, and Alan as well. It's interesting how much commonality there is there amongst us that is not necessarily, there's not necessarily that commonality in the greater, business environment. But so on top of what Kevin was saying, I really try to, we have definite core values and a North Star with culture and traditions around that. But I also really try to reinforce accountability and ownership within that. And an example was, as we were trying to remake culture in LA, there was a team member complaining a bit about, thought maybe it should go, even though it was moving faster, and had this issue and that issue. And I just challenged them. I said, look, culture is not what I am dictating to you or what our CEO is dictating to you. You are part of that culture formation and reinforcement. So talk to me. I am very open. Talk to your team members. I'm very open. If there is something here that is not congruent with what we're saying, or that you think can be improved upon, take that ownership, but don't just chirp in the back room and create little fiefdoms, because that's not going to work for me. Hit the
I think
brakes.
we talked a little bit about that in the panel, and how important it is, and this is something that's also come up recently in the last couple of weeks. There's two things that just made me think of of a couple of things. The first one is talking about ownership, and I think we talked a little bit before about how even in these roles that we have, we make mistakes, and how do you fix those kinds of things? I mean, that's there's and owning it is the number one answer. Own it, address it, and move along quickly, and part of it, I think, speed is important to people, and the faster you can own something when you make a mistake, the better. And then there's the if you're complaining to someone who cannot do something about the problem, that's a problem. Find someone who can help you. The leadership group here has open doors, and and otherwise it's just complaining. If you take it to the right person, that means you have a genuine interest in fixing it.
Mhm.
I'll add one thing here before we wrap up. Alan, I'm not skipping you on purpose. I'm going to come back to you as a follow-up with the party planning committee. One specific thing that we started several years ago, and as this conversation came up, I was trying to actually think of what year it was. I don't remember, but it's been a long time. And, the company at the time, we had hired, we didn't hire Dale Carnegie, but probably somebody similar. And they were going to put together an employee survey and then go through a process of follow-up after we got all the feedback. And I wasn't a cynic by any means, but I thought, okay, well, this is going to be everybody's time to tee off. It's anonymous, and I don't know that we're really going to get anything out of this. And that first year was just really powerful. It was anonymous. There was a lot of compliments. There was a lot of things that we were doing really well, but the feedback, the criticism, whether it was constructive or just a real frustration, was really powerful. And because it came from their words and they were in a safe space to say it. What really was interesting to me and kind of eye-opening in the strategic side of our approach to culture was, well, now what do we go do with all of this information? You create the themes and then you address it as a group. It's not management address it and then go figure out how to fix it on their own. The entire staff got to see all the information. And again, no name, so it wasn't like anybody was sitting in the corner sweating. Oh, I hope they don't read my quote. But it was really powerful and some great stuff came out of it. But it allowed the entire group to take ownership of the process. And it allowed the group to take ownership of the ideas. And ever since then, we have, we've done this survey every year. And it's now come to the point where it's really effective and that it's really easy. It's expected. The ownership comes from different pods in the building and within the company. And they know exactly what they have the freedom to say. And it's just about anything. The gloves can come off if they need to. But then we sit down and we figure out, okay, what's actionable? And, you talk about the party planning committee. We've got a couple different versions of those. Some great annual staff events have come out of this. The way we function in the building and remotely, some great ideas have come out of that. And it wasn't from the management team. The feedback came from the employees. And so, what started off as kind of a mystery, like, oh, this will be interesting, turned out to be a really powerful tool. And Alan, how much of that do you advise? Do you, are you part of that process from beginning to end? If you're advising somebody, hey, we're gonna put together, whether it's a survey or however you're gathering feedback. And then what kind of specific ideas have come out of your process working with different companies?
Yeah, so 100% congruent with what you're focusing on there. In fact, we do it internally. The last 4 years, we've done a survey, and then the comments that come out, then we release that to the team, and then we really train companies in using a tool we call IWWCW, which is in what ways can we? And it's built off of an idea that people support a world they help create. So, exactly what you're talking about, you get a team and you say, here's a comment. In what ways can we impact this over the next year? That team gets together, they get those ideas, we get those presented, and then we track action so that the team sees the traction that happens, right? You track action to get traction, right, for the team. And so what that does is it builds confidence and it builds that culture that, hey, it's us, we've been a part of it, and now we're owning that process moving forward. So I think that system can be really, really powerful, for organizations. And so the ideas that come up are just tremendous for different organizations, whether it's ways to help reduce turnover, whether it's ways to kind of hit our objectives or our goals, ways that we can get back together. There's a lot of things that are bred from that. I'm thinking of one in particular where it was just an engineer that worked for our company. And because of that ideation and the leadership's openness to those ideas, they realized that they had been buying something to kind of fix something that this guy could do himself. And he was happy to do it. Like he just took him like $43 just to fix this several $100,000 issue that they were having. And I think that's where when people are really feel like you're going to activate them and I can bring everything into the environment, I can, back to our title, I can be awesome at work, then they're going to start bringing those ideas of ways that we can just do amazing things. And so sometimes it's internal ideas. We can communicate better if we did this. One person I remember in a conversation, this was last week, the idea had come up. They're like, I don't really know what everybody does. Like they were kind of back to that Gen Z. They were like, I don't really know what everybody does. Is there any way to have like a poster or an org chart or something that kind of just gives me an idea of who everybody is? So to kind of the point earlier, if I see them in an elevator, I kind of know who this person is. So there's a lot of ideas that can come up from that, that are pretty cool. Like one group I remember like they created walk-up songs for everybody, right? So like when everybody came on, they had their own walk-up song, like, and you had every genre, every era, walk-up songs. And so it was just kind of a fun way to do that. So I think that's exactly it, right? When we focus on that people support a world they help create, you create that vehicle for your team, they'll care about the culture more than you do, right? Because these are the people they're working with. And I talked in the panel about how we do a culture interview, and we tell people it can't, when somebody's interviewed and the culture team is interviewing them, it can't just be a yes. It needs to be a hell yes, that this person needs to be a part of our team, because then everybody said yes to this person is going to help them be successful. And the other side of it is, I was just thinking as the others were talking, about 6 months ago, I had to let somebody go. And this is, I think, that one of the crucibles of culture is, are you willing to let go a high performer solely because of culture? And if the answer is yes, then their team says they're serious about it. And if you keep somebody on because they're high performance, even though they're not about culture, that it loses all power, right? Are you willing to let go of a high performer simply because they don't fit the culture of the team? That's, I think, where the proof is in the pudding, if you will.
Wow,
Amen.
great point. Any other final thoughts before
I'm curious, Mike and Alan. You talk about the internal sort of survey or feedback. Do your company sort of in conjunction with that also do an external? My company's, I think it's so instructive to see when we're doing these side by side, do what we think our culture is, does that match up with the external perception? Luckily, for the most part, it is, but there's refinement within both of those. So I'm just curious if that's rare or not.
I think that's rare, and that's also awesome. To me, that shows that you're partnering and collaborating, with you view those individuals not just as customers or clients, but you view them as stakeholders to
Absolutely.
your success. And that's fantastic.
We've done that, John. I don't know that we've done it recently, but I agree with the whole point. I think it's really powerful. RJ, we have officially wrapped up on our end, and I don't know if you want to close up with the housekeeping, or is that my job?
I'll take care of that. Listen, guys, I just want to say thank you. And I would encourage anybody watching this to go back. And it's not a shameless plug. Of course, we want you to watch all the sessions from CRS that you missed. But I think that this is a great companion piece to the live session that you did in Nashville. It didn't rehash anything, a lot of great extra information. So I just want to say thanks to everybody on the panel today. And again, here's the information to reach all of our panelists one-on-one if you have any questions about anything that was discussed today. And Thanks everybody for joining us. Mike, Kevin, Alan, and John, thank you very much.
Thank you guys. And Mike, you undersell yourself as a moderator.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did fantastic. What a great conversation.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
Hey, the next one I do, if asked, you're definitely going to hear me quote some Alan Walker lines in that one.
Very nice.
The next CRS360, by the way, the one for May, and those you radio guys might appreciate this, we're going to go back to the research that we presented at CRS. We did a follow-up with a music test, but we're going to come back and talk about personalities and the impact that we think they can have and continue to have on radio audiences. Just a little teaser there for next month. So be looking for that. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Great job, everybody.
Thank you all.